I'll say this for him, he's consistent.
Well, he's been so consistent all year.
Not the taste, consistency.
Consistently, yes.
Consistency! Thanks, losers.
Hello, everybody, and welcome again back to the Fantasy Football Consistency Show. I am your co-host, Bob Lung from Big Guy Fantasy Sports, and I want to welcome in my illustrious co-host with me, Ron Rigney. Ron, good to have you back.
I'm glad to be here, man. It's been a nice little Sunday. I did some squats earlier. I did leg day, which proves that not only are we consistent with our fantasy football, but we're consistent with our workouts as well, because one rule is you never skip leg day.
Are we? Because I squatted down and picked up some of the empty beer bottles that were laying in the trash that I had to take out into the recycling. So that's probably the only squats that I've done in
That counts
weeks.
for me. That's perfect.
Yeah,
that's perfect.
I mean, it's, yeah. So, I run to the bathroom, so there's some exercise. I did work out for 3 hours yesterday cleaning up my leaves in my backyard. So I classify that as exercise because I was physically exhausted by the end. But, no, someday, no, it probably never happened. I was just say, I actually did work out maybe 10 years ago. I was pretty much into it. I was doing like P90X and that stuff, but too old for that. Now I just worry about fantasy football and the consistency in that, and that's what we're here to talk about. So, last 2 weeks we got into the quarterbacks and how we're looking at those for 2018. We know it's a little early with the draft still coming up here in a couple weeks. What do you say we look at some running backs this week?
I'm glad you mentioned the draft there, because I'm curious as to, us being football guys and consistency and all that. Where does the draft rank as far as your most favorite sports events to watch?
I think it's, we jokingly call the draft the Super Bowl for the Browns because every year that's what we have to look forward to see what amazing pick guy we're going to pick it, in the top 6, only to watch them crash and burn within 2 years and we waive them. I think I read this, that we have no draft picks that we picked in the first round now since over the last 5 years or something like that. Something horribly bad like that, outside of Myles Garrett. But I feel like the other ones have all come and went, because I think Danny Shelton was a pick 2 years ago in the first round. He's gone. It's ugly. But there is hope in Cleveland, so we're happy now. And, one of those running backs are on the Browns, which we had, which was very consistent for his 49ers last year. And it's funny because every time I'm talking with one of my friends or somebody about football, and I tell them how excited I am to have Carlos Hyde, they're like, but he sucked. And I'm like, no, he didn't. He was actually very good for the 49ers. I said, I think we got a hell of a deal on it. But, what do they know? So, anyway, we're going to talk about running backs this week. We're going to go through the current ADP on My Fantasy League, which is right now at 113 drafts, or top 100 running backs, 12-team leagues, full redraft, PPR. There's some rookies in it. We're going to skip by those, of course, at this point. But I'll turn it over to you, Ron, and let's get this party started.
Yeah, so speaking of a hell of a deal on Carlos Hyde, we'll get to him later on, but I think you're going to get that according to this ADP in your fantasy drafts as well. I think he's going to be a hell of a deal there as well if he can duplicate what he did last year, which I don't see any reason he can't. Might even be a little more effective. So one of the things that I love about running backs is, it seemed like 2-3 years ago, everybody was so down on the running backs and everybody was preaching the zero running back theory, which there really is no such thing because you're not drafting zero running backs. You should have said maybe call it the weighted on running backs theory or something. But it's cool to see all these running backs kind of back where they should be, because outside of the quarterbacks, these are your guys, especially in PPR scenarios like we started our ADP with here. They're the ones getting you the points. They're the ones that are putting up the touchdowns. They're the ones that are getting the catches out of the backfield. And obviously these guys at the top of this list are doing a little bit of everything for you. And so as we start down here, we're going to hopefully hit maybe on about 15 or so today, do this over the course of a couple weeks. Who knows? We might have so much fun. We might even do it a third week.
Yeah.
Who knows? But starting off, obviously, when we look at overall ADP here, this guy had a hell of a season last year, huge bounce back candidate. came at a little bit of a value as far as what he was able to give you, and that's Todd Gurley. And Todd Gurley's obviously sitting at the top there. He's averaged 1.8 picks, so he's just right there in the top 2. So what are we thinking as far as what we can see out of Todd Gurley coming up? Are we going to see a repeat of 2017?
I can't see any reason why not. I mean, we know, just to kind of go back to what you had talked about, when he came out of college, he was a high pick. Everybody was, high on him. He had a great start to his rookie season. If I'm not mistaken, he went, I think, 7 of 8 the first 8 games, clutch games for consistency purposes, and then went 3 of 8 over the last 8 games. And, I felt that teams had kind of figured out the Rams at that point. They didn't have a really good quarterback. Goff was a rookie. He, played a little bit near the end of the year, but basically teams were just stopping Gurley and saying, okay, beat us with your quarterback, and it wasn't happening. And, so the next year came, and everybody still was high on Gurley. Oh, Gurley's a god. We should take him in the first round. And I was like, nope, I don't think he's ready. I don't think they have the team around him to make him, be as good as you think. And I was telling people, do not pick him in the first round. Pass on him and let somebody else have him. And, as the story goes, I was correct. And so I didn't pick him. But then last year, it kind of came, like you said, full circle. And I was telling people, now is the time to get him. Goff is in his second year. They got a new coach, new attitude. I think this is the year to get Gurley, and he was available in the second round. Get him as your, RB2 or second round RB1 after you draft a top wide receiver, and obviously that paid off very well. So now as you come into 2018, he's going to be a top 3 pick. Just the way it is. He may, and I could certainly justify him being number 1 based on the numbers he put up last year. 93% consistency, number 1 in fantasy points by 40 over Le'Veon Bell, and they both played the same amount of games. His X consistency was at 24, which Bell's is at 21, so he is easily the number 1 pick. I can't argue with that at all. And the team around him has continued to get better. They brought in Brandon Cooks now, so they've got a great passing offense. So there's not one thing you can, you can't put 8 men in a box against the Rams and try to stop Gurley, because they're going to burn you with the, passing game. So, everybody's going to benefit with Gurley there in the backfield. I think he puts up pretty similar numbers. I'm not expecting to be much higher, much lower, but let's be honest, there's nothing wrong with what he did last year. He could go over 400 points if he plays all 16 games, which he missed one. I think that just because they didn't have him play in the last game because they had already wrapped up a spot. So he could go over 400 points. Beyond that, that one extra game could help, but usually that's week 17 anyway, and your fantasy season's over. But yeah, in my opinion, Todd Gurley is the hands down number 1 pick this year.
And I agree. And when you get a guy last year in second round that you got for that value, that's getting you nearly 2,100 yards from scrimmage. You think about too. He's a tough runner, but a lot of things that you forget about with him are the catches out of the backfield.
Right, yeah.
And they've gone up exponentially every year. He's went from 21 as a rookie to 43 in that down season, which in a PPR is still solid for your running back. But last year, 64 catches, but the 788 yards. I mean, he averaged double digits as far as catches. He had an 80-yard reception, 6 receiving touchdowns to go along with 1,300 yards on the ground and the 13 touchdowns there. So, you get that kind of production, you're going to have to pay that premium for it. And so I think that's definitely justified for him being, at that high pick that he's going to be coming into this season.
Yep. Can't argue.
Yeah, and so I think that's definitely justified at the top there. So as we move on here, and it's kind of chalky here at the top. You kind of know who we're going to go on to. But you get into a little bit of back and forth here as far as who you could take with that next running back spot. And so we'll stick to the ADP here. Next guy we got on the board is Dallas Cowboy Ezekiel Elliott. He's sitting there as a second running back, overall pick right around 4 in our ADP here, and a lot of questions surrounding this team. One of the big things we had last week is, and we talked about it before, how it kind of looked like the handwriting on the wall was that Dez is going to be sent packing, and that actually happened for sure. So how does that affect our guy Ezekiel Elliott coming into 2018?
I don't think that affects him at all. I mean, I think Dak Prescott, they'll get another receiver in there, whether it's a rookie, a very good rookie, or they might get, somebody in the free agency or trade or something like that. But, they've got enough to keep people honest. Nobody's going to stack the box against Ezekiel Elliott because Dak Prescott with Jason Witten, Alan Hearn, Beasley, Terrence Williams, these guys are all serviceable veteran receivers, and they'll make those teams pay. Dez definitely lost a step last year. Really wasn't much of a factor at all based on, you can see from the fantasy numbers and consistency numbers. He really wasn't much of a factor. So when Elliott was on the field, Elliott put up clutch games. His 90% consistency last year, 9 out of the 10 games he played. I mean, he was 12th in total points, and he missed 6 games, people. Think about that. That's just impressive as all get out. Ezekiel Elliott, whether you pick him at number 2, number 3, he's certainly worth one of those top picks. It's just a question of where you're at, whether he falls to you, and if he's sitting there. Outside of Le'Veon Bell, to be honest with you, I don't think I would pick anybody else over Zeke. I mean, he's just that good. He's that much, worthy in the passing game. He's very involved in the offense. The offensive line is dwindled a little bit, but it's still very good. And Zeke is just a great player, and he'll be fine. Keep his suspensions at bay, and he gets to play all 16 games, and he's certainly going to be right up there with Gurley and Bell at the end of the year.
And I'm going to throw this out there. I don't know how likely this is, but if the Giants are willing to trade Odell Beckham, wouldn't shock me if the Cowboys figure out a way to get him there. Odell Beckham, to me, screams Dallas Cowboys wide receiver, and I think that's a match made in heaven. I think that would just be something fun to watch, and so I hope that really happens. But, yeah, Zeke Elliott, I think that you could make a case even for him at the number 1 pick. Todd Gurley's awesome there, but I think Zeke's a guy that I would definitely, kind of like you said, Bob, I'd take him over Le'Veon Bell for sure. The 4.1 yards a carry, but when you look at the receiving part of it, he only had 26 catches, but he did average 10 yards a catch, and I think that's pretty big. And I think too, if you can, I don't want to necessarily say that you have to look at this as a guy at the top of here because he's going to get the ball, but I think his volume is going to go up a little bit too, especially if they do add, they're not able to go out and get a flashy receiver, like Odell Beckham. He's not going to come cheap, but I think that's going to up the catches a little bit. I think that's going to give him a few more carries. And the other thing is too, you think about in 2018, maybe as far as looking at it from a fantasy draft standpoint coming in here, maybe it's a good thing he only played 10 games because it cuts the mileage a little bit on him last year. So
yeah,
it's a little fresher than we expect as well. Right. So anyway, 3rd pick. Le'Veon Bell, pretty easy one to figure out. We mentioned him a couple times here, and with these next 3, 4, you can kind of flip flop the order there. Got Lev sitting there as the 3rd running back, number 5, 5.5, 6 pick off the board overall, and guy that has a little bit of controversy around him every year seems like, but he goes out and performs. He gets franchise tag every year. He's not got that big deal yet. So I guess my question is he going to be your 3rd guy off the board? For sure, is there anybody else that you might take over him? You think he's? I guess I'm asking, is he going to slip from that 3rd running back spot? You think?
If I'm drafting, no, because the other choices are David Johnson, Kamara, Hunt, and I feel like while those guys are good, David Johnson missed a whole year. Sam Bradford's a quarterback. The offensive line was pretty putrid. I'm kind of worried about David Johnson. Not that I wouldn't take him at number 6 or somewhere like that, but I don't think I can put any of those guys ahead of Le'Veon Bell. His consistency over the years has just been, 90% plus. And that's just too good of a number to believe that he can't continue that. He's going to be playing pissed off. He wants a big contract. He didn't get it again. He's going to be playing for big money, so he's going to go out there and give it all he's got so that he can get paid by somebody. Could the Steelers pull that trick again? They could. But my thought is that, this is going to prove to them that he's either worth it or he's not. It wouldn't surprise me if Big Ben has a down year or, average year and he starts contemplating retirement again. They might just clean house and, trade Bell off and get something for him, and start just kind of revamping this team. But for now, I think they're all going to be playing for the big money, and they're going to have some competition in the Central this year. So I think Bell's still the number 3 pick. He's got the consistency. He's always there. He's got the numbers, second in total points, ahead of Kamara at number 3. I think that he's just more reliable. We don't know about Kamara if he can come back and have another great year like that in that offense. We assume he will, but we've also seen people that have great rookie seasons and then Doug Martin and then come back and not put that together again. So we'll see. But Bell's my guy at number 3.
And one of the things that sticks out to me too with Le'Veon Bell is, and I didn't realize this until I started prepping for the show today, he had 85 catches last year, because I don't think I had one share of him in one league, and it's one of those things where he's just locked in that spot no matter what. If he's playing, he's in there, and you don't really have to look and shuffle your lineup. And so, not to say I didn't pay attention to his stats, but 85 catches, 321 carries. I mean, he's getting the volume. He's getting the ball. Despite having Big Ben and having Antonio Brown there, he's going to be the focal point of the offense. And like you said, he's 26 years old. He still didn't get that big contract. He's got a fire underneath him to get one. And so I think you see just more of the same. The only thing that I think that can slow him down is injury at this point. So we're hoping that doesn't happen if we spend that high pick on him.
He's had that happen a couple times. Yeah. We talked about last week with Big Ben and how much they had to throw the ball at the second half of the year last year after Shazier went down, and that defense is just a shell of its former self. That's where he's getting all those catches from, is that they're playing behind a lot. They're always trying to get back in the game, and he's just so talented out of the backfield, play action passes, and then he goes out there and he's wide open and can go for 20, 30 yards a pop. So, like you said, he makes it up in the PPR format. That's why he's near the top all the time, because he's always catching the passes, and always, like you said, he's always in that 70, 80, 90, catch range every year. So, that certainly makes him why he's so valuable in a PPR format.
No doubt. So we're going to move on, and we mentioned this guy before, David Johnson, sitting there at the fourth running back up the board around pick 7. And he's a guy that I think I kind of like as far as maybe a little bit. I don't want to. You wouldn't dare say he's a sleeper, but I think that he's a guy that some people might forget about at the top of the draft. I don't think he's making it out of your first round. And like you said, Sam Bradford's that guy that should be thrown in jail for stealing all this money from these teams that he signed with and got these big contracts from. He's the guy, which I guess it's a little better than what they had left as far as on their roster. But still, the offensive line needs a little bit of work, and so I don't really know what to expect out of him. But another thing, we talked about with Le'Veon Bell is I think you could see a lot of volume there. You had the injury last year, but 2015, 2016, 16 games played both seasons. His 2016 numbers, very similar to what Le'Veon Bell did last year with the 1,200 yards. He had 16 scores on the ground, also had 80 catches. I think that, the 80 catches for sure, I think that's something he can duplicate this year. So, let's see here. Who we got behind him? We got Kamara and Kareem Hunt. Are you taking Johnson over those two guys?
I think it's going to be very close between Kamara and Johnson for me. I think I would probably lean David Johnson just because I think, again, he's proven, he can do this. He's been a stud before. Not that I don't believe Kamara can be that, but, rookie, first year, teams make some adjustments. We'll have to wait and see. He had that concussion, and those concussions scare me. When you have your first one and now you're kind of like susceptible to that, I'm always a little worried, but I know it can happen to anybody. But if I had to pick, if I'm sitting at number 4 and Gurley, Elliott, and Bell are gone, I'm probably taking David Johnson over Kamara. But it's going to be really close. A lot of it will probably, by the time we get actually big into drafting, might have a little more window to what's going on, how, preseason, that kind of stuff. But I don't think you can go wrong with either one. If you take one at 4, take the other one at 4, or and whatever one you get at 5, I think you're still getting pretty similar numbers from both of them. Kamara's got to share with Ingram, so that's why I think David Johnson probably is going to end up with the better fantasy value overall in total points and consistency. But that's who I would lean. I'd lean toward David Johnson at this point.
Yeah, I think it's a little further for me just because, and you kind of made the argument for me. It's not that I don't like Alvin Kamara. I don't like Kareem. It's not that I don't like those guys. I think that David Johnson's just a guy that's going to get the volume. I just don't think there's a whole lot else there in the cupboard offensively, and so I think he's going to be the guy as long as he stays healthy. He's going to be the workhorse, and so these running backs that are with that workhorse type with the Le'Veon Bells and the David Johnsons and Ezekiel Elliott's of the world, they're about the only and this is why these guys are at the top, is because they're the ones that get all the volume. So I'm pretty comfortable picking him there. But like I said, I'm not taking him over those top three guys. I'm not taking him over Gurley, Elliott, or Bell, but I'm very comfortable getting him in that mid to late first round, depending on the size of the league. So I'll take that all day long as far as from a volume standpoint for sure.
Yeah, and I've seen some drafts that I've seen David Johnson around 7 and 8, and I'm like, shoot, I'd be giddy to get him around 7 or 8.
Oh yeah,
but yeah. So 4, I mean, I think he's worth it. But at 4, I'd also be sitting there going, should I take Antonio Brown if it's a PPR format? Because he could definitely be, he's got the consistency and the numbers as well. Around that number 4 spot, I think has to come into play as an alternative, and as a first round pick, outside of the running back realm.
Agreed. We're kind of skewing it here though a little bit because we're just looking at running backs. So.
Right. Sure. Yeah.
We'll talk about those guys in a few weeks. So.
Yeah.
Those wide receivers are kind of important too. I think in a little bit. Leagues. So we mentioned this guy as well. The 5th guy off the board, Alvin Kamara. You kind of alluded to the fact that he does share time with Mark Ingram, but he made enough big plays last year as a rookie that he definitely warrants being up in this discussion in the top part of this ADP for the running backs here. So he's our 5th guy off the board. He's right around pick 10. Do you like him? And I know we're sorting it as far as PPR, but are you as big of a fan of Kamara in a standard league as you are a PPR league?
I'd have to say, yeah. I mean, he's scoring touchdowns. He's getting some carries. He's putting up yards in that. He'd probably fall a little bit for me. He might fall down a little bit farther. I might pick a few wide receivers in front of him in a standard league, like Julio and Antonio Brown and some of those kind of guys. But he's certainly right there. He's, again, he put up 13 straight, well, not counting the week he got a concussion, put up 13 straight clutch games outside of week 14's concussion. It's hard to argue with those numbers. Now, I realize it's PPR. In a standard league, I was going to pull up those numbers real quick. I'm clicking. It's not doing anything. There we go. Talking my way through it. He was 13 out of 16 in a standard league, 4th in total points still. So yeah, it's hard to argue that he's not worth it even in a standard format.
Yeah, when we're looking at the clutch stuff too, when he's 3rd in total points, but he's 5th with clutch rating off the board. 81%, sitting with 13 out of 16 clutch games, and to me that makes it all the more impressive when you're sharing carries with a guy like Mark Ingram, who's right there as our 7th most consistent guy off the board. So that tells you right there just the level that those two guys were at. They're only separated by one guy, Melvin Gordon, there on our consistency ranks. And so that speaks a little bit more to what he was able to do as far as the rushing stats. I mean, just 7.5 yards or 7.5 attempts per game is what it shook out, but he put 8 touchdowns up on the board, averaged 6.1 yards a carry, so all around pretty impressive as far as big plays. You're getting big plays, 81 catches, 5 touchdowns there. So once again, there's not really a whole lot to not like about Alvin Kamara, and I think he makes a very strong case for being up around pick number 9 and the 5th running back off the board.
Well, and the other thing too you got to remember is Kamara really didn't burst onto the scene until around week 3 and 4 when they finally kind of cut ties with Adrian Peterson, and then he became a full-time starter. You take those 2 games and add in a couple of these other. I mean, he could go perfect 16 of 16 in a PPR format. Interesting enough, going back to the standard league comparison, Kamara did not lose any percentage. He was still 81% in a standard league, but yet Mark Ingram dropped from 75% down to 63% in a standard league format. So that's showing you that Kamara is keeping keeping kind of the force there from a standard league standpoint versus PPR. Ingram drops off a little bit, so that's where Kamara comes into play as the better option.
Agreed. I definitely like him, and the other thing is too, it's not a bad consolation later on if you can get Mark Ingram out of that backfield too, with what he was able to do last year. So move on down the list a little bit. We got a rookie here in our midst, so we're going to skip him because we know how we feel about rookies on this show. And so we're going to go our seventh guy off the board, pick number 12, Kareem Hunt. And Kareem Hunt's a guy that it seems like, we've talked about a few of these guys as the season went on last year. People were getting frustrated with the production and frustrated with what they did, but when you look at the overall body of work, and I know we preach consistency here, when we look at what Kareem Hunt did, you got to go down the list a little bit as far as consistency. But when you look at the overall body of work, he did lead the league in rushing last year with 1,327 yards. He scored 8 touchdowns. And so I think he kind of got a bad rap as far as he wasn't as bad as people made him out to be. You referenced Carlos Hyde. Carlos Hyde, I think, is the poster child of that as far as people being down on him last year. But what do you think about Kareem Hunt at this spot, and do you think the quarterback change is going to impact him much?
I'll just make this statement right now. I don't think I'll be drafting Kareem Hunt at all in the first round. And I'm going to give some reasons. He reminds me a lot of Gurley. Rookie season, first 7 games, perfect 7 for 7 in clutch games, and then the rest of the season he goes 4-4-9. That scares me a little bit. That tells me that defenses were making adjustments. The teams were forcing the passing game to beat them. Alex Smith did a pretty good job and put up a lot of numbers, and you could say, well, he probably beat them because the Chiefs did have a pretty good year. Now you have not a rookie quarterback, but you have a very unproven quarterback in Patrick Mahomes. He may be the second coming of Lenny Dawson in Kansas City. I have no idea. That's the way everybody seems to be talking about him. But again, let's be honest. If the defenses are going out there and they're looking at this team and they're like, okay, well, Hunt's going to be getting the ball in the backfield. Mahomes is the new guy. Well, let's put pressure on him. Let's make him beat us in a few games. If Mahomes can do that, and he's certainly got the weapons with Kelsey and Hill and all these guys, then things will come into play. But I have a feeling that Kareem Hunt could start off with a little bit of a slow season until Mahomes kind of gets his bearings and kind of gets his set. And because of that, I'm really worried about Hunt as a first-round value. I really believe his consistency is going to start slowly. He might get a better second half, but until Mahomes gets kind of in the mix, I'm kind of worried about Kareem Hunt personally.
Makes for maybe not necessarily a guy you want to target unless you get a value on it, but it could make for maybe a first few weeks nice little trade target there, a nice buy low guy possibly if it shakes out that way.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that definitely could be the thing where he starts out and maybe he only has 1 clutch game or 2 out of 4, and people who got burned in the first round. And this is what happened with Todd Gurley in his second year. Everybody was all high on him going into it, just like they are Hunt. He started out slow. People kind of gave up. I remember there's lots of people trying to trade Gurley off. Gurley really didn't turn it around. But by the end of the year, he was like 11 or 12 out of 16. It wasn't that bad of a year, but his second half was certainly better once the passing game and everybody kind of got in sync. And then that's where Gurley kind of broke out this year. Could almost be similar things happening here. Again, Hunt starts off slow. Mahomes starts off slow. They start clicking second half. And then going into 19, Kareem Hunt could be a good value because of his slow 18. Could play out the same way. That's kind of where I'm leaning. And like I said, at this point, I don't see me drafting Hunt. I think if I'm sitting there with Hunt on the board, I'm looking at the wide receiver position to see if I got somebody with more consistency that I can count on, whether it's Julio Jones or Antonio Brown or somebody like that I can believe in before I'm going to go with the Hunt. Or I might go with the Melvin Gordon, who I know has proven that he can do this time, day in and day out.
I like that comparison there to Todd Gurley, because that is kind of eerily similar to how that scenario might shake out with the the change at quarterback and then coming off the rookie season. So we'll see how that works. Now, next guy that we're going to talk about on the list here is a guy that I like a lot this season. I'm definitely not taking him in the first round, but I like him a lot right where he's at that. If I can get maybe one of those guys at the top, or if I can get one of those receivers kind of in the mid first round, and that's another second-year guy coming into this year, and that's Leonard Fournette, sitting as our 8th running back off the board. Average pick right around pick 15. And another one of those guys, too, that was, I think, kind of, I don't want to say like sneaky consistent, but another guy that, at certain points in the season, people are talking about, do I trade him? Do I bench him? What do I do? And all he did was go out and get you 85% of clutch games. And so I think that's pretty solid for a rookie. But he's a guy that I definitely like heading into this year. I like some of the additions they've made as far as on the Jags offensive line. The defense we know is going to be solid. He did finish in 10th in total points. Played in 13 games, was consistent in 11 of those, and so I definitely feel comfortable. I definitely would target him over Kareem Hunt. I don't know if I'd move him up much further than that, but if I can get him right about there, I would love to have Leonard Fournette as either my. I wouldn't be so unhappy having him as my RB1 in most formats. What do you think about Leonard Fournette as your RB1?
I'm okay with Leonard Fournette as my RB1 if I can get him later in the first round. Again, if I'm sitting there at the 7 or 8 spot and I'm got to decide between Fournette and Melvin Gordon, I'm going Melvin Gordon every day of the week. I like Fournette. I think he's a good runner, but there's a couple things that scares me about him. One, he seems to be a little injury prone, nicked up here, nicked up there, missed a game. He's kind of a head case at times. He got suspended for a game for team rules. That's the kind of stuff that just kind of gives me that uneasy feeling when I'm picking this guy in the first round. He needs to be practically flawless to me. If I'm picking somebody in the first round, I need to rely on not only 75 or 80% consistency, which you're getting out of him, but I need him to play all the games too. Because, 85% consistency in only 13 out of 16 games means you're kind of more like 65, 70%. So I like Fournette, but I think if his ADP keeps him in the middle of the first round or, 8, 9, 10, maybe I'd really like to get if I had to get him, if I'm sitting there and I don't have any other options, I don't have the option of taking Gordon or somebody like that, then I think Fournette probably won't be on my team. But I think if I'm picking, again, around 8, 9, 10, I might have some running backs or might have some receivers that I might be looking at too. And I might pass on Fournette, take a top receiver, and then come back and get somebody like Mark Ingram in the second round. But not that I hate Fournette. I'm not hating on him. I'm just a little worried about some of the little things that happened last year that just keeps me a little bit at bay about him.
Well, and it kind of brings up a good point, too, as far as, when we get past about the, top 3 guys here, top 4 guys, when you're looking at consistency, when you're looking at the stats from last year, when you're looking at injuries, it comes down to kind of personal preference, too. So, it just depends upon how your team shakes out. And, that's always what we talk about, too, here. At the end of the day, a lot of this stuff is applicable across leagues, but when you're sitting there on draft day, it just, and if you're drafting with guys that you kind of know what the tendencies are too, but it just kind of determines what everybody else kind of determines what you do in when it's draft season. So after Fournette, like I said, I'm a big Fournette guy this year. I think, like I said, if he can stay healthy, I love what he's going to be able to do. Another guy coming off his rookie season, coming off a shortened rookie season because of injury, and that's Dalvin Cook. And Dalvin Cook, when he was in there, he's 75% consistent, 3 out of 4 games, like what he put up on the board. But the problem was just what we talked about, before with David Johnson. He missed most of the season because of injury. The other thing that gives me a little bit of pause that I'm not sure if I would be looking at Dalvin Cook right here, in addition to coming off the injury, is just the size. He's 5'10", 210. Doesn't really have that build to be that every down back. I don't know if he can take that pounding maybe needs to add a little bit of weight to the frame. I compare him to the 6'2", 230 Leonard Fournette, who's kind of built for this, and so it gives me a little bit of pause there. I wouldn't be ultra upset getting him at this point, but he's a guy that I might move a little bit further down. What do you think about Dalvin Cook coming off the injury?
Yeah, I don't believe that Dalvin Cook is a first rounder. I wouldn't be taking him in the first round. If he would fall to the second, third round, and he's my RB2, I take that chance. I just don't know where. Based on these ADPs, he's going, late first, or mid second round, and that's just a little too early for me for a guy that only played 4 games. Now, 75% consistent. He certainly did well in those 4 games that he played, but like you said, he's a smaller build. Can he go the whole season? They have Latavius Murray. Will they mix it up with those 2 guys to keep both of them fresh? That would be my thought, especially depending on how well Dalvin is coming back from the injury. I didn't look into where he currently stands. I'm assuming he's on pace to get back to health. But again, at this point, I'm not going to pick him that early. Maybe my RB2 if I can get him in the, like I said, early third round, late second round, and I'm already locked in with a Gurley or somebody like that. I might take him. But again, a lot of it's going to depend on who else is available, what other proven veterans are there that I could pick instead of him, like Ingram, McCoy, Carlos Hyde, Devontae Freeman, guys that have proven themselves worthy already. I'm probably not going to take a chance on Dalvin Cook at this point.
Yeah, as I look down the list here, too, there's quite a few guys that I would move up above Dalvin Cook. And not to say that I don't like him, but if this shakes out with these values that we're looking at here, which there's a lot that could change between now and actual draft season, there's 3 or 4 guys easily that I would put above Dalvin Cook as far as taking him off the board as my RB2. He definitely wouldn't be my RB1. If he's my RB1, I think I'm in trouble.
Yeah, I agree.
So we move down to number 10, guy that you've mentioned a couple of different times, and another guy that just is consistent across the board, didn't have a lot of huge outputs, but had output every week, and that's kind of what we preach here, is that consistent output every week, and that's Melvin Gordon. And Melvin Gordon sits there, like I said, at number 10. Overall, he's going to get pick number 21, 22 off the board. Not a bad value. When we look at consistency rankings, 81%. Our number 6 guy across the board in consistency, 5th in total points, played in all 16 games. Overall, just kind of like what you said, more proven, more what you're getting with Melvin Gordon. So what do you think about as far as Melvin Gordon going into 2018?
Well, I would probably weep profusely if I'm sitting there and Melvin Gordon falls to me at number 22 in the draft, because I would be so happy I wouldn't be able to control myself. I mean, this guy has put up, back-to-back years over 80% consistency, 85% 2 years ago, last year 81%, 5th in total points, and more importantly, 7 straight at the end of the year through the playoffs. He was there for teams. He helped you win your, was one of the factors probably helping you win championships or get deep in the playoffs. And like I said, if I have a choice between him and some of those other guys, Hunt, Fournette, Cook, those kind of guys, man, I'm taking Melvin Gordon every day. And if he can fall to me in the second round, oh my gosh, I don't even know how to react. Again, I think he'll go first round. I mean, I know these are early ADPs. I think this is a little bit far down for him. I just don't see any reason. But you know how people are in the fantasy world. They get very excited about, the young guys, the rookies, the second-year guys. And as you can see, there's some of those guys that are already ahead of them in ADPs. Maybe dynasty leagues, sure, I get it. But, man, there's just no way if I can, I'm going to pass on a Melvin Gordon, or if I see he's going late first or early second, and I've got that around the wheel pick there, around the turn pick. If I could wait to the second round and maybe go double up and get, like you said, somebody like Fournette and Gordon, or or even a top receiver with Gordon, man, I'm just going to be real giddy. That's for sure. He's just so proven, has done it back-to-back years. The Chargers team is a solid offense. They're always playing from behind. Their defense is never very good. As long as he stays healthy, and that's the key, and he has for 2 straight seasons pretty much, he's going to put the numbers up that you can rely on, and that's what like you said, that's what we preach here, and he's definitely one of my favorite picks going into this year. Is if that's the value he's going to fall out at.
And that Fournette-Gordon start would be ideal. There's a lot of scenarios I'd love to have that happen. And one thing, I'm going to give a shout out to the guys over at footballoutsiders.com, because I was looking through some offensive line stats earlier, and I was trying to see some different rankings as far as run blocking. And one of the things that they have over there that's really cool is they have a couple of different systems that they use to rate offensive lines as far as rushing stats. And one of the things I thought was interesting about the Chargers offensive line is we all kind of know it's not the best in the league, that's for sure. But one of the things that they have is they have a stuffed ranking, and it basically is ranked 132. How many teams, when the ball's handed off, the offensive line allows the running back to be stuffed at the line of scrimmage, and want to get the lowest number you can, and the Chargers are sitting there with 26, and so that tells you right there that they're not getting off the ball. They're not opening up a lot of holes for Melvin Gordon. So I think that kind of makes, when you look at their numbers across the board, their running back yards per carry across the board was at 3.9 yards per carry, which isn't terrible, but obviously you want to try to get above that 4. I think that speaks to a little bit of the talent of Melvin Gordon, what he's able to do with definitely a subpar offensive line. So if you get a chance before you head into your draft, it's worth checking this chart out over at footballoutsiders.com. Pretty cool stuff there.
The other thing about him too is that he catches enough passes to be very relevant in PPR, but he also maintained that 81% consistency in standard leagues as well. So he's tied, with Alvin Kamara, and he was only actually 2.7 fantasy points behind in a standard league behind Kamara, and yet you might be able to get Gordon 6-7 spots after him. That's just great value to get Gordon at that spot. So definitely well worth it.
Yeah, 58 grabs, 476 yards, and 4 touchdowns through the air. So,
right.
And I think there was a couple weeks there as well where I had Melvin Gordon and he didn't do much on the ground, and it was those receiving touchdowns that made it a consistent week for him. So, definitely going to help you there. So we move down a little bit. Look at yet another young guy coming into his second season. A guy that there's a lot of questions surrounding as far as what is going to be the usage of him coming into the year, and he's a guy that you have to, when you're looking at our consistency rankings, kind of scroll down a little bit to find, but overall had a pretty solid season. Definitely caught the ball well out of the backfield, and that's Christian McCaffrey sitting there as our 11th running back off the board, right around pick 22. I don't know about you, seems a little early for me for Christian McCaffrey. And he's a guy that I have yet to see as far as what he's going to be able to do between the tackles. I don't think they gave him the ball enough last year. However, Jonathan Stewart's out of the mix there in Carolina, so he might be getting a few more carries there on the ground. But I don't know necessarily if I'm looking at Christian McCaffrey outside of a PPR league. Standard league, I don't know. He'd have to be a pretty good value for me. Any difference there for you as far as Christian McCaffrey?
I mean, I think where he's at is fair. I mean, when you look at the fact that in a PPR format last year he was 9th in total points, played all 16 games, 69% consistency, 13th overall rank. So, sitting around, the end of the RB1, early RB2, I don't have a problem with that. But I think I'm with you I don't want to pick him that early. I really want McCaffrey to be my RB2 in a PPR format, because that's where his value is you get a stud quarter or running back up top, and you can put him as your RB2 with the catches he'll get. You'll feel, like you said, you feel like he'll get a few more carries. I think they're going to rely on Cameron Artis-Payne to fulfill that Jonathan Stewart role, and he's pretty much the same back. That's why they drafted him, I think, a couple years ago. So, there won't be much changes there. I don't think he'll get as many carries as Stewart did. I think there'll be a little bit more 50-50 sharing with McCaffrey. So I think McCaffrey has some value there. But again, if I'm looking at who I'm going to pick, I'd rather have a Devontae Freeman maybe, or a Mark Ingram or McCoy before I'm going to take McCaffrey. And if he's sitting there at that spot, like you said, 22, 23, I have to feel like there's probably a wide receiver that I want more than I want McCaffrey at that spot if he goes that early. I think he'll fall into the late second round, early third round. But again, a lot of it's going to depend on the format. It's PPR. He'll certainly be up a little bit higher than normal, but I think he's good value, but this may be a little bit too early for me as well.
Well, and he's another guy, too, that the size scares me a little bit. So maybe in hindsight, it's not a bad thing that he didn't get a bunch of carries between the tackles last year. 5'11", 205, not necessarily a short yardage back, a guy that you're going to want to give 20 carries a game to. So I can kind of understand where that comes from a little bit, I guess. But like I alluded to before, I don't know if I'm going to be paying that price for him, but if I can get him as my RB2, especially in a PPR, I think that's a great setup. And so we go down the list a little bit. A guy that seemed to be a little bit up and down last year as far as just consistency, as far as production, as far as how many carries he was going to get, what his role was going to be in a crowded Cincinnati backfield there, and that was Joe Mixon. And he's another guy, once again, that's sitting there as a 12th running back off the board currently, right around pick 28, 29 range. And, another guy that you got to scroll down the consistency list a little bit to find, because I kind of alluded to it before, until he got a lot of more, until he clearly defined what his role was, he got a few more carries here and there. Only 50% as far as our consistency ratings, and only 31 in total points, and that's in 14 games played. So are you taking Joe Mixon here above guys like Devonta Freeman and Jordan Howard?
I'm not only am I not taking him above them, I don't know if I would take him instead of Jay Ajayi. I mean, he proved nothing to me last year. They switched offensive coordinators. They said that at first that was the problem, and that helped a little bit. He had a couple clutch games, but the second half of the year, he went 2 for 8 in clutch games. I mean, if this guy is this good and he's got this kind of talent, how is he going to get that much better this year? I mean, yes, they got rid of Jeremy Hill, and maybe he took a few carries away from Mixon, but he never seemed to show that flash and everything that everybody was talking about. Now, again, I know that guys can come into rookie years and be poor. If I remember right, I think Melvin Gordon had a terrible rookie year and then kind of turned it around in his second year. And maybe that can happen with Joe Mixon. But there is no way in this world that I'm taking a chance in the first 2, 3, or 5 rounds on Mixon until I see something that tells me this kid's got it. And I don't think this kid's got it. He didn't prove it. He didn't have any of those games where like, oh, well, there's the Joe Mixon we know and love, or there's the Joe Mixon that we should be seeing. And let's be honest, the Bengals didn't do anything in the offseason to improve their team that much. Like I said, they got rid of Jeremy Hill. I think they may have added an offensive lineman, but they're still going to be basically the same team with the same coordinators and the same head coach. So I don't see a lot of change there. There's no way in this world Joe Mixon's going to be on any of my teams, that's for sure.
Well, and the funny thing there is you can't really make that Jeremy Hill argument either, because when you look at what Jeremy Hill did last year, he only played in 7 games, so that gave Joe Mixon plenty of opportunity, and he only carried the ball 37 times and only had 4 catches, so he only had 41 total touches. So it's hard to blame the guy that's out of town now, Jeremy Hill. and I know that last year, my boy Colby Conway and I doing the Consistently Cashing over there at BGFS, there was a few weeks where Joe Mixon had some cake matchups that should have been DFS and fantasy gold, and they were not. And so I know that there was a couple weeks that we were kind of sweating bullets there at the end of the day, and luckily we had some other guys in our lineup that picked us up a little bit, because we had all our eggs in the Joe Mixon basket, and it didn't really materialize the way it was supposed to. So I definitely think him and Christian McCaffrey right there are a couple of guys that are a little bit overhyped that I don't know. I'm kind of with you on that one. I'm not paying the price.
I mean, I'm okay with McCaffrey, like you said, maybe a little bit lower. Mixon, like you said, I'm not even sure I'd take him in the 4th or 5th round ahead of probably most of the guys I'm staring at the screen at. And you know that if I'm thinking about taking Jay Ajayi before I'm taking Joe Mixon, there's a problem.
It's hard for me to believe that Bob Lung has a new Jay Ajayi, and that's Joe Mixon. I never thought I'd
Joe Mixon will just take over for Ajayi this year.
And the thing is too, the guy that we're going to talk about next, it's amazing to me. Now I know this ADP is early. I know this guy shares the backfield with another solid running back, but it's crazy to me that he's ranked ahead of the next guy. We're talking about Devontae Freeman. Devontae Freeman sitting here as our 13th running back off the board, sitting there right around pick 30. And you know what you're going to get with Devontae Freeman. Like I said, they've got a solid offense there. He shares the backfield with another guy that's pretty talented, but there's no way I'm taking Joe Mixon above Devontae Freeman. What do you think about Devontae Freeman as about number 13th back off the board? I think it seems a little low.
Freeman just didn't seem to put it together last year after he had such a great year 2 years ago. I'm still a little worried about the fact that last year he was 13th in total points, so you're like, okay, that's not bad. But only 64% consistency, so he was right there, and Tevin Coleman was 22nd in total points, but it was only one clutch game behind him at 60% in 19th. And yet, if you look at the list, you'll find probably Tevin Coleman a lot farther down value-wise, so it may make more sense to take Coleman. So, like I said, I loved Devontae Freeman in the past, but I just feel like the new offensive coordinator just doesn't get it. That Sarkisian just really made a mess of that team last year, and that's why. And I don't know what they're going to do about it. I assume he's still there. I don't think they got rid of him. So I'm probably not going to have any shares of Devontae Freeman going into this year. Again, if I'm sitting there and I've got to choose between Freeman and Ingram and LaShawn McCoy, he's third.
Well, and the thing about, the one thing about Devontae Freeman is he is pretty consistent as far as how many games he plays. And I just looked up the coaching staff there, and it is definitely Steve Sarkisian still calling the plays there as far as he's listed as head coach, passing game coordinator, offensive coordinator. So yeah, he is still offensive coordinator. It looks like it's going to be more of the same. So yeah, I guess from that standpoint, I forget about him being the coordinator there. I don't know. You got me kind of thinking now. I'm definitely not taking him. I'm not taking Joe Mixon ahead of him. I can tell you that. But
if I could get Devontae Freeman as my RB2 heading into 18, I'm perfectly fine with that. I just don't know where it's actually going to fall out when we get closer to draft month. Drafting in August. Or late July, if where he's going to be at. If I get him as an RB2 and I've got a really solid RB1, then Devontae Freeman's a great value at RB2. Am I going to pick him as my RB1? In the second round, pick this looks like it's be a third round, pick 29. Again, maybe if I got two fantastic wide receivers, if that's what I got left. But like you said, I look at the list and go, well, there's still Mark Ingram, there's still LaShawn McCoy, there's still Carlos Hyde, there's still Kenyon Drake, there's still Tevin Coleman. I feel like there's other choices I feel just much more comfortable about that I know I'm going to get closer to 70-80% consistency than I am 64.
And I think, and part of that too is I don't have last year's ADPs in front of me, but Devontae Freeman was pretty hyped coming into the 2017 season too, and kind of didn't like you said, he didn't live up to that RB1 status that I think a lot of people picked him in. I know I definitely had him in one league where he was one of my high picks. He was definitely my RB1, and not to say he had a bad season, but it just wasn't RB1 value that you expect to get when you spend that high pick. And so next guy we're moving on to, guy that definitely disappointed last year, and he's got a little bit of controversy kind of surrounding him. I know I read a couple weeks ago where he put his house up for sale and he deleted his social media accounts, and that's Jordan Howard. And there's a little bit of trade talk surrounding him, and he hasn't gone anywhere just yet, but it's one of these things where we're heading into draft season. We're about 10, 12 days away from the draft, and you can still see something happen there. But Jordan Howard's sitting right now as the 15th running back off the board, people taking him around the pick 38 to 40 range. And once again, another guy you got to scroll pretty far down the list to see as far as where he's at consistency-wise. Sitting there with 201 total points, 14th in total points, but only 50% clutch rating. And he's a guy, too. I didn't have him as my RB1, but I had him in a couple leagues where I really expected a bigger season out of him. You had the rookie running back coming in, and it just didn't seem like you got what you paid for last year with Jordan Howard. Is that going to be the case in 2018?
I'm still a little leery on him. Like you said, even last year, he never really put that string of games together that made me go, okay, yeah, I see there's some issues, but this changes and this happens, then things will improve. Now, you could also say, well, the Bears have went out and they've added some good, wide receivers. They've added Allen Robinson. They got Trey Burton. So they got some people there to maybe take some pressure off. The scenario last year, if you really look at it, is there was no passing game. They had a rookie quarterback. You had no receivers. All the receivers got hurt or were just bad. So, again, I think a lot of it is going to depend where Howard falls in the ADPs. If he's far enough down, I can get him as an RB2 with that chance that he could turn it around and the offense kicks back in. Because he certainly had some games where he was amazing. I remember that Steelers game when they won in overtime, and he just destroyed the Steelers. I think he had did he have 200 yards rushing, or maybe it was 200 yards in total points, or 200 total yards. But I remember he had just a monster game against the Steelers, and I'm like, wow, yeah, Jordan Howard, yeah, he's the man. And then the next week fell off the face of the earth. So I think right now I'm still kind of on the fence with him. I feel like, again, RB2 value better, not RB1 value because of last year. I'm hoping that everybody kind of has that same feeling and kind of pushes him aside and lets him fall a little bit farther down. But, I think he's got the talent. He certainly has shown it, flashes of it last year at some games. But, that we still haven't seen the offense around him gel, and with Trubisky still not sold as being a stud quarterback or that good of a quarterback to make a difference, to keep teams kind of from stacking the box. So at this point, I'm probably a little bit down on Howard, but I'm open to suggestions. Let's just put it that way.
Well, and I think he's one of the guys, too, that when we look at running back spot, he speaks to what we do with consistency. Because when you look at his overall numbers from last season, it's a pretty solid year. I mean, he did play in all 16 games. He had over 1,100 yards. He had 9 touchdowns. But when you look at the consistency ranks, he's pretty far down the list. I mean, right. He's a 22nd guy as far as our consistency ranks at 50%. And so, it's kind of a textbook example of when you look at the whole season numbers, not too bad. Oh, I might take him. Oh, I can see that ADP. But then again, when you look at our system, not so much value. And, what we talked about in that show we did a few weeks ago about preaching the consistency, you want this production every game. You don't want it to look good at the end of the year because you're going to be scratching your head like, what did I do wrong? I think he's a good example of that. So
yeah, and I mean, only week 3 and week 4 did he actually put up back-to-back clutch games. Other than that, it was 1 up, 1 down, 1 up, 1 down, 1 up, 1 down. Almost did that. He was almost consistently inconsistent with one clutch game next week not. He had one where he had 2 in a row not, and he had 2 in a row that he did. Other than that, he was 1 on, 1 off. And man, you want to talk about something that kills your team when you have him watch it, like I said, have a huge game against Steelers and then come back the next week and, have 40 yards rushing. It's just devastating. And again, that's why we're kind of here preaching to kind of maybe just kind of keep Jordan Howard, keep him in the back of your mind, but don't get too excited to be drafting him too high just yet. Let's wait and see till we get a little bit closer in the year and see where his real ADP value falls out at.
Well, I know he was another guy too, kind of in that Kenny or Joe Mixon boat as far as being a little bit inconsistent, I should say, as far as our DFS matchups for a few weeks there. Once again, had a couple of nice matchups that really didn't materialize that way. So it'd be interesting to see what happens to him if he is actually traded, or if that's just a big smoke screen and nothing really becomes of it. Next guy we got on the list here, and he's a guy that it seems like right after the season, hype train, number 1 value, he's going number 1 first round overall. Slow down a little bit as far as the hype train here on Derrick Henry. He's sitting here at the 16th running back off the board, pick 40. Is that a direct result of Dion Lewis coming to town, Bob?
I think it does. But I think that was a good move on the Titans' behalf, so that he didn't have that full pressure of having to do everything for that offense. Now, fantasy owners, dynasty owners all wanted that because they wanted him to carry that much. But he's still a young kid and he's still a running back. There's just so few guys that you can put out there that can be a Le'Veon Bell and can play that many snaps in a game and not get beat up. I think it was a good move for the Titans. I think this will help Derrick Henry keep his legs fresh. One of the things he does very, very well is that fourth quarter, running over people because, he's fresh, he's ready to go. That's what they would do when they had Murray. They'd bring him in the fourth quarter and he would just tear teams up because he had the fresh legs. If they can mix in Deion Lewis with him and keep that going, I think Henry becomes a more consistent back and can be very helpful, to the people that are going to draft him. Now, he hasn't played in a full season as the main guy, so that's the one thing, again, that kind of scares me of him his ADP being this high when I can still, again, as I'm looking at the board, go, well, if I have a pick between Derrick Henry and Mark Ingram and LaShawn McCoy, again, he's third. I'm not going to take that chance of him going that early. I'm going to take a more proven veteran that I feel that is going to, I know and I can rely on, are going to put up the numbers. Henry will be good. I think he'll be a solid pick. Again, I'd rather have him as an RB2, but I think he'll be, I think the hype train died off a little bit for good reason, but I think he'll be a solid and pretty consistent fantasy player because I think he'll get the touchdowns, but I wouldn't put him like top 12, that's for sure.
Yeah, and I don't think that the Deion Lewis signing is going to hurt him as much as some people think.
No.
I think he's still going to get his share of carries. It's going to be way more than he's gotten the last couple seasons. And, I mentioned a couple guys, too, as far as I'm scared of the lack of size. You look at Derrick Henry's bio here, and he's 6'3", 247. So he's definitely got the size to be a pounding back and you'll get, like you said, get the touchdowns. And, we know a little bit about the offensive line there. It's pretty solid across the board. So, yeah, I think I'm with you right there, though, too, with those guys that you mentioned. I'm not taking him above Ingram. I'm not taking him above McCoy. Depending on the value, he might be kind of right there with me as far as Carlos Hyde, as far as consistency, what he's going to give you. So we'll see how that shakes out. But, like I said, I think you said Derrick Henry, he will be good. I agree with that. It just, like I said, you got to see where your draft shakes out. So next guy on the board here, 17th running back, Mark Ingram. We've alluded to him a couple times. His backfield mate, Alvin Kamara, way up the list there, but really not a whole lot of separation between the two. And in terms of our consistency list here, when I scroll down here a little bit, we've got Mark Ingram sitting there at number 7, 75% consistency, 6th in total points. Kamara was 3rd in total points, and so two guys there in the same backfield that just kind of carried that offense, and they got a decent quarterback there in Drew Brees as well. So you seen more of the same of Ingram, or you think he's going to fall down the consistency ranking list a little bit? What do you think?
No, in fact, as we're getting close here, we're pretty much running out of time for today's show. I'm going to combine the two old guys here, Ingram and LaShawn McCoy. And I'm going to pretty much say if I can guarantee that I can wait to the end of the 4th round and pick these guys back to back, I can't tell you how excited I would be to get two guys that were over 75% consistent last year, combined. Yes, I know McCoy's a little bit older. I get that, but man, those two guys sitting there at that far down the draft. But it just shows you how the age of players and their roles and how people can easily forget how effective these guys were last year and should be for no reason. I mean, now McCoy, we don't know. I mean, they lost Tyrod Taylor. They've got obviously not going to have the strongest quarterback situation. They went out and got A.J. McCarron, so that could be troublesome. But on the other hand, that just means McCoy's going to get more passes out of the backfield in a PPR format. And I think these two guys are just such great value if they can fall, even if they fall to the 3rd round, these guys both have great value. And again, I'm easily picking these guys over Henry or Jordan Howard or Freeman. Mixon's not even an option in my mind. So I just feel like these two guys are just such great values. They've been so consistent in the past. Outside of the year before, when Mark Ingram, kind of just for some reason fell out of favor with Sean Payton. I forget. I think it was 2014. He was the number one most consistent back in a PPR format of all running backs. So, I mean, Mark Ingram can put up the numbers without even thinking. 2015. He only played 12 games because he got hurt, but he was 92% consistent. Even missed 4 games and was still 12th in total points. Granted, there was no Alvin Kamara, and I get that, but it just goes to show you that he can be a very good back in whatever role he plays. And in the role he played last year as being a nice complement to Alvin Kamara, he was still 6th in total points, 75% consistent. If I can get him as my RB2, 4th round, holy cow. Man, getting this would be off the charts.
Well, and I like the fact that you mentioned McCoy there, too. A couple things about both of these guys. I think it helps, too. McCoy was consistently a late first-round pick last year going into 2017. It definitely didn't perform like a first-round pick, but still 1,100 yards, 6 touchdowns. That's nothing to sneeze at.
Yeah, as I say, 70 total points and 8th in consistency. That's a first-round value in my mind. Now, people may not believe that. They may not look at it that way, but I thought he was fantastic.
Yeah, and the thing about with Ingram and Kamara too, I don't think necessarily I would want both of them and start them both every week. I know there's lineups that had that last year, and you did have some success with it. But the thing when you have a talented backfield like that is if you get one of those guys, and you don't hope for players to get hurt, but if you take Mark Ingram and you get him at that value, and Kamara's out, he missed the games last year with the concussion.
Right.
You've got a guy that steps in and becomes an RB1, becomes the focal point of that offense, and you don't have to necessarily, hopefully, scour waivers looking for a guy to fill in. You benefit from that injury happening to another team in your league. That's your benefit too. So that's another upside with Ingram as well.
But I tell you, I don't think I would rule that scenario out. If I take Kamara and I'm picking fifth or sixth or whatever, he's sitting there and Antonio Brown's gone, and I just feel like, okay, he's my best value. And if I'm coming in, and I now go out and I pick a couple top wide receivers, consistent wide receivers that I really like. If I'm going into the 4th round and all of a sudden I'm staring at Mark Ingram, and my other choices are Carlos Hyde, Ajayi, Tevin Coleman, Drake, whatever, I'm like, I'm going to take Ingram. Why not? I mean, again, like you said, you got dual consistency over 75%. I mean, that's no different than taking Alvin Kamara and taking LaShawn McCoy. I mean, you're basically getting the same. They pretty much were similar numbers last year. Ingram was 6th in total points. And McCoy was 7th in total points. And their consistency was, both 75%. So realistically, if people would say, oh, well, I wouldn't do that because I don't want them both on my team. On the other hand, if you took LaShawn McCoy, you basically drafted the same player. And Ingram's, a year or so younger. So year or two younger. So I think there's actually very good reason that you might want to do that if that's what your option is at that point. I think you're making yourself great. And then, like you said, if for some reason Kamara would get hurt and you lose, everybody would be like, I'm devastated, I lost my first-round pick. Well, your first-round pick just got filled in by the guy that should be a first-round pick in Ingram and can fill that role without even thinking twice.
Right.
So.
And I think too, just real quick to add to that point, I think that comes down to a preference thing, because I always get a little bit sketchy on having too many teams where you have that quarterback wide receiver hookup, or you have too many players from the same team, and that's just me in any sport. I get a little bit leery of that, and especially football, because I'm always afraid if they go in against a good defense and that defense shuts everybody down, then you've got 2 spots you're not getting production from. But the numbers don't lie as far as consistency as well. And like you said, if you take the names away and you look at those 2 guys at that value, you're sitting there at the end of maybe the 3rd, 4th round, and you're getting Ingram as your number 2, and you don't know the name, but you just know the production.
Right.
It's like a pretty solid pick there, no matter who you got in that 1st round.
All right, well, man, time flies. We're having fun. We had a lot of fun there. Ron, thank you so much for driving us through a good stretch of running backs. We'll definitely be back next week to look at some late round values, and there are some really interesting guys sitting there that I think will provide some excellent value as an RB2, RB3, guy that you can maybe sneak in. So we're going to get into that next week. But Ron, thanks again. Why don't you tell everybody where they can find you at?
Find me on Twitter at TheRealMade. Baseball, football, whatever it is. Tweet me whatever question, concern you may have. You'll catch me actually this week. I'm getting ready to do a little guest spot on the Bench with Bubba podcast, talk a little baseball with him. So I'm excited about that. Yeah, so we'll be doing that a little bit later tonight. And of course on NastyCast, fantasy baseball podcast with the dashing Van Lee and the ultra handsome Nathan Dawkin. And we also do the Fantrax Dynasty Baseball as well, looking at your minor league stuff. And you can catch me over Big Guy Fantasy Sports, doing various things over there. I'm kind of like a Canadian quarter. You can't get rid of me, man.
I got you, man. All right, Ron. Thanks for being on here again. My name is Bob Lung, Big Guy Fantasy Sports. All about consistency, and you can find me at Bob_Lung on Twitter. And of course, you can email anything you want to know, consistency football wise. Because I'm not very good at baseball, even though I'm doing pretty good in our one league. Tough week this week. I think I'm tied 5-5. But
I think you're doing better than me. So
yeah. Well, the guy was tied for me second place, so tough matchup. He's got the pitching and I've got the hitting, so we're basically 5-5. So anyway, everybody, thanks for listening up. And again, we'll be back here for a second round of fantasy football running backs and consistency next week on the Fantasy Football Consistency Show. Everybody have a great week. God bless and take care.